what we call spiritual is really what I believe is the physics we haven't understood yet. And it really is a new model of what we understand consciousness to be. Because not only is this fundamental oscillating field at the quantum level the source of matter and mass and gravity, but it is most likely the source of consciousness as well. Imagine this field of information, very highly dense in information, right? It's like a super dense hard drive, but the feedback between feed forward and feedback is an appropriate description of self-awareness, meaning that the universe is learning about itself this way.
So thank you so much for this interview, and it's such a great honor to talk to you in person.
Thank you. I like your back wall.
Yeah, thank you. Ever since I got acquainted with sacred geometry about 7 or 8 years ago, it just changed my life, and it just gave me the language and the concepts and the conscious understanding to explain to myself and to others what I already knew as a child, but I didn't have the words for that. And especially since I got introduced to your work, it just blew me away, and you made a huge impact on me, and you just make all this field of inquiry so accessible for people who are not scientists.
Thank you.
So it's very, very accessible and very tangible, and you have the most amazing presentations.
Thank you.
So,
I appreciate
welcome.
I like your earrings too.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Tricycles. So I'll introduce myself a little bit to you. I'm a multidisciplinary artist, a tattooer. I developed a kind of a profession that I call spiritual guidance through the art of tattooing. And I'm a researcher of tattoo history and sacred geometry. And both things I incorporate within my work with people. And actually, the most important thing for me to do is to create together with them a talisman of sacred geometry that will, be a good impact, a good resonance as a bodily daily reminder on their skin. And for me to tattoo sacred geometry and teach them sacred geometry in the process is the most profound thing, because to tattoo those patterns are basically like, bringing them home, because, we're made of them. So to be in a conscious relationship with your tattoos every day, and they, the message gets right into your subconscious. So you can do a really profound energetic work with it. So I really, really love it. So in the back is all of my tattoo designs, or some of them. And I'm really happy to say that people in Israel are becoming more and more aware of this kind of body of information.
Oh, yeah.
And studying sacred geometry and listening to you, especially. Yeah, you just in the last year or so, I think you came out with this whole arc technology and arc crystals. So
yes.
Can you talk about that for people who don't know anything about that?
Well, it's a long story, and it's a long story of the history of humanity. And it's a more esoteric part of the physics I do. So I want to make sure it's taken in that context. From early on, when I was studying physics, I was developing a theory of my own. I felt there was some errors in the standard model, some places where the standard model diverged and got, and went towards dead ends, which it's at right now. I felt like there was a lot to learn from ancient civilizations because they had spent thousands of years thinking about the same subjects that physics thinks about. What is the nature of reality? What is the nature of our existence? What is the nature of the universe? And so I didn't discount earlier thoughts as invalid just because they were prior to our modern physics. And in fact, they had much more time to think about it. And, you know, maybe I felt we missed something. And a lot of the physics I was studying and the physics I was coming up with had a lot of geometry involved in it. And the geometry seemed to be the part that kept on falling out of conceptual physics, of conceptual math. To me, it was clear that there was a divergence, very strong divergence, away from geometry. Einstein brought it back in a little bit with general relativity, where he geometrized space-time, and he did it with a set of mathematics that is very high conceptual math that use very specific concepts of space, the Minkowski space, the Riemannian space, and so on. And so I felt like there was something present in the ancient knowledge that was not really brought into physics appropriately. And so I studied the Pythagorean schools, I studied, you know, Plato's work, and I definitely studied some of the more esoteric part of what Newton was doing. Most people don't realize Newton was really an alchemist and certainly was into esoteric mathematics and esoteric physics very early on. And he studied ancient Hebrew and studied the Temple of Solomon and reproduced the Temple of Solomon, made a little model of it that still is, you know, I think it's in a museum. I think it's at the British Museum. And there's, you know, he wrote a lot about ancient Hebrew, and he felt, and it's in his writings, that if the Temple of Solomon was understood, then the understanding of gravity would be complete. He felt like that in the Temple of Solomon, there was a key to the nature of gravity.
Do you think Newton was studying Hermetic texts and like ancient Egyptian texts?
Yeah, he was as well. But I think when he was talking about the Temple of Solomon, he was talking about the one that's very specific to the Hebraic tradition and to the temple that was built, the first temple that was built, you know, in Israel, where the Dome of the Rock is now, which was the whole purpose of the Temple of Solomon, was to host the Ark of the Covenant. That's why I'm talking about this. And this is, you know, it was built to place the Ark of the Covenant at its center in the Holy of Holies, where the Dome of the Rock is now, where, you know, the rock that's underneath it is supposed to be the rock where the Ark used to sit on in the Holy of Holies at the time of the Temple of Solomon. Now, you know, it's kind of funny that Hebraic tradition and, you know, Islam actually meet right there in the context of the Ark of the Covenant. It's mentioned in both. It's thought that Muhammad ascended from the Temple of Solomon, from the Holy of Holies. This is why the Dome of the Rock is there. It's the third most sacred spot in Islam, and it's the most sacred place for the Israeli first temple tradition, meaning the early books and the early knowledge, the early writing about, even in the First Testament of the Bible, it's all about the carrying and the carrying of the ark away from Egypt and into Israel, and the building of the temple to host it. From the studies I've made, I've come to conclude that this power source, the ark that seemed to be a power source, the way it was described, is not something necessarily that was built by the Israelis, meaning I believe that it was taken out of Egypt. It was a power source that was in the pyramids that was taken out of Egypt by Moses because he was son of Pharaoh and he had access to all that. And when he left with the tribe of Israel, it's very clearly described as leading the tribes of Israel out of Egypt and before crossing the Red Sea. It's described as a pillar of light ahead of the tribes of Israel and a pillar of cloud, during the day, which is like a vortex of cloud. It's always shown in old Bible tablets. It's always shown as a vortex in the tabernacle, and so it's clearly described there. I'm going to try to give a shorter answer, but it's a long story, right?
Just to add something small, when you were talking about that the temple was created in order to become around the ark technology for whatever it was, I just started reading, I'm in the process of reading this book by Stephen Miller from the chematology school.
Yes.
And he says there that Abdel Hakim Aoyan says that exactly the same thing, that in the pyramids, in the Pernetters, the house of the energy, the water was supposed to be placed over the rock or the substance, and be oscillated by it. So it also coincides with everything that you say.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
It's a great book.
Oh, I should read it. I spent some time with the chematologists in Egypt in October, and
Yes, I know.
it's remarkable what's emerging out of Egypt right now.
Yes. What do you want to talk about first? About Egypt, or to talk about your ark technology?
Well, I was getting to that. I was on my way. So basically, the ark described in the Torah has all kinds of gravitational effects. It's described as, so what I believe happened is that they used the ark to open the Red Sea, which is a gravitational effect. And then on the other side of the Red Sea, they built the box that we know of as the ark to protect it, to shield it from the rest of the tribe of Israel, because you had to be trained very specifically to be able to be close to it. There's many description in the Bible of mishaps where people show up in the wrong place at the wrong time, walk into the tabernacle, and they get zapped and they don't survive, right? And so they were being very careful with it, but as well as described in the Torah that the ark carried the carriers, meaning that it floated the carriers. The carriers were floating the ark, and that it was used to open the Jordan later on in the same way that it was used to open the Red Sea. So that tells you that the power source was already there prior to the crossing of the Red Sea. But most importantly is that I believe that this technology came from an earlier civilization, much earlier than Hebraic or Egyptian, that is pre-cataclysmic. And archaeologists around the world now, especially in Egypt, and Egyptologists and chematologists are starting to agree that many of the monuments we find around the world actually were not Egyptian, they were not Mayan, they were not Inca. They came from an earlier civilization that was their pre-cataclysmic. And I believe that civilization had very advanced gravitational technology, which the remains of are clearly decimated all around the world. Huge rocks that we would have an extreme difficulty lifting, even with all our technology today, that are moved hundreds of miles in some cases, you know, which we couldn't do today. We couldn't move them that far. We might be able to lift them and move them 100 feet, but we wouldn't move them across sand dunes and rivers and, you know, 1,000-ton blocks and so on. So, you know, this advanced gravitational technology, I have, so what I've done is that I've married advanced physics, physics of unification, of a very advanced knowledge in physics with ancient symbol, which I believed were representation of this technology, of this power source, which is tapping into the structure of space-time itself. And I have come to very advanced, very important results, meaning in the physics I wrote, I was able to predict very important things like the nuclei of atoms, the proton and the electron, and all the electrons of the table of elements at this point in a more precise way than any other theory on the planet at this point. You know, the standard model is off for the radius of the proton by 4%, which is a lot in quantum physics. And my theory is within the margin of errors of the experiments, which is very high accuracy. So it's really important for the readers to understand that this is not just coming from philosophy, this is coming from straight up physics and predictive physics, physics that's able to predict what we see in our world. And then I've started experimental study to try to reproduce this technology because I think it was left for us to rediscover at this time in this evolution so that we could eventually, you know, become part of the galactic community, or at least become space-bound, you know, and have colonies and so on, because planetary systems are unstable. Living on the surface, at one point or another, they can be a catastrophe. You have to know how to control gravity to be able to live and expand a civilization past their own planet. We're not going to colonize other planets using fossil fuels.
Yeah. And actually, maybe we already have the technology. It's maybe more a matter of releasing it to the public and not leaving it to the entitled and privileged people.
The military-industrial complex. Yeah. I think the military-industrial complex has some versions of the technology, but I don't think they have what is required, because they've used the standard model of physics, and that will not get you there. So, you know, I put on the market last year a first iteration of the ARC technology, which are crystals that have been oscillating with the structure of space-time because of the way they are constructed, and because of what has been done to their molecular structure, so that they couple with the structure of space-time and oscillate and produce a little bit of a coherent field in their surrounding. And we've been testing it with thousands of tests. And it clearly, if you expose water to it and then you water your plants with it, your plants will grow 300% faster. They will produce more fruits. Almost all of their seeds will be viable, where usually that's not the case. There'll be almost 10 times more seed production. So it has a positive effect on life. And you're made out of mostly water. So I've started to distribute these crystals so that people can structure the water of their body and have positive health effects.
So actually the small crystals to put on the body is just another product, and there is a bigger product of a kind of a big oscillator for the enhancements of foods and seeds.
Yeah, the crystals that are on the market will do that if you just expose your water to it. You know, you can just put it under the cup of your water cup or a water bottle, whatever. You don't have to submerge it in the water at all. Just put it underneath it, and it will change the structure of the water. It will increase in pH and so on. But yes, there is the mother technology that makes those crystals that is eventually gonna be developed further to eventually hopefully give gravity control to the world, to allow us to control gravity. I mean, think about it. We built this whole modern society because we learned to control magnetic fields and electromagnetic fields, right? And we built this whole society based on that. Now the next step for humanity is to learn to control gravitational fields. Now the interesting thing is that I don't think this is new. I think this is actually extremely old, and there's evidence of it all around the world, and that might sound shocking to people. And I think that this power source that was in the Temple of Solomon, and I believe there's another one that's under Mecca, and you know there's multiple ones. I think that those are actually some of the remnants of this very, very advanced technology that was present on our planet a long time prior to our current evolution.
Yeah. And do you think, I was having a thought, asking myself whether the oscillation process is connected to the Schumann resonance? Can you talk about that, if there is a connection?
The oscillation of the crystals, or the
oscillation in general?
Well, the Schumann resonance, the fundamental resonance frequency of the Earth, and you know it involves all the dynamics that happens in the ionosphere and the atmosphere, and as well the physical size of the Earth. I believe that this is the fundamental biorhythm of our, that allows for that, like all of the biology basically on the planet is tuned to that frequency. But the isolation rate of the structure of space-time at the quantum level is called the vacuum oscillation. Those vacuum oscillation are very high frequency, very, very high frequency, much higher than anything else. And that's why it's so energetic. It's extremely energetic. It's extremely short wavelength. So there's a lot of energy in a very small amount of space. So like, to give you an idea of the numbers, if you took a centimeter cube of space and you filled it with all the stars that we see in the universe, which is billions of stars per galaxies, billions of galaxies, imagine how bright that centimeter cube would be, right? With all the stars in it. Imagine all the energy that would be in there. Well, that's 39 orders of magnitude less than all the energy in the Planck oscillators of the vacuum that's present in a centimeter cube of space. So you can imagine, if we tap into that source of energy, if we extracted even 0.1% of the energy that's in a centimeter cube of space, we would have enough energy to run the whole world for thousands of years. So it's significant amount of energy. My theory, and as I said, it's now confirmed by accelerator measurement of the nuclei of atoms. My theory actually says that actually that energy is the source of everything we see. It's the source of all the matter, of mass, of all the forces. And learning to engineer devices to connect to that energy might be the key to the survival of humanity.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just amazing. I think the torus and the origin of spin and the understanding of oscillation is one of the most fascinating thing about this field. And it's also very intuitive and also very scientific and rational.
What we call spiritual is really what I believe is the physics we haven't understood yet.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I started to write biophysics papers. I published one last year. It was published in Quantum Neurology journal, and it was cited by a very advanced team of scientists in Europe now, and it really is a new model of what we understand consciousness to be, because not only is this fundamental oscillating field at the quantum level the source of matter and mass and gravity, but it is most likely the source of consciousness as well, meaning that the dynamics of the electromagnetic field and the gravitational field produce a feed-forward feedback loop. So you can imagine feed-forward would be the electromagnetic field radiating out, and feedback would be the gravitational field going back in, right? So imagine information bit. Imagine this field of information, very highly dense in information, right? Like every Planck oscillator is like a bit of information. You can think of it that way. So imagine like it's like a super dense hard drive, right? But imagine the information is like a fluid. It flows, right? Like so that like a fluid like water is made out of little bits that we call molecules that flows, right? So imagine the bits of information like being like molecules in water flowing. When they flow out, we call it the electromagnetic field. When they flow back in, we call it the gravitational field. Mm-hmm. And so we can couple to it using electromagnetic field to produce a gravitational field. It's a straight up proposition if you understand these physics. Now, but the feedback between feed forward and feedback is an appropriate description of self-awareness, meaning that the universe is learning about itself this way. And it produces more and more complex systems, very advanced, very organized, complex system, because it has this feedback information loop. And so it doesn't function under random function. It actually is learning about itself. And so it can organize, because this is a big problem in physics. How is it that we're here, very complex systems, right? A human being is made of 100 trillion cells. Each cell is made of 100 trillion atoms, right? I mean, it's a very complex system. There's over billion, there's like 1,000 billion chemical change every second to make it all work, right? This doesn't happen under random function. Even since the beginning of the universe, it wouldn't be enough time for the universe under random function, if you do the calculation, to come up with even just monocellular life would be too complex. So how did we get here? Well, the complexity demands feedback, right? And this is why, you know, the physics community insists on random function, because they're afraid that if they say it's not random, then the religious come in and say, oh, it's God. Well, there's another option, and that is that everything is God, meaning everything is sending information into the field, and everything, and the field is sending information back into everything. And so everybody's participating in a unified field, literally, that connects all things. This is why the documentary about my work was called The Connected Universe.
Yeah, it's as if there are like many big bangs happening on the quantum level all the time. There's not like
Exactly.
one big bang in the history, but it's big bangs are happening all the time in every breath.
Right.
And yeah, an oscillation is a concept that I think it's hard for most people to understand. And I think it's very important
You know
to,
why? Is because when people visualize oscillations, they visualize a screen on a oscilloscope showing a trace that looks like a waveform, right? But the universe is not an oscilloscope, and it's not it's not trying to display a waveform. It's not doing any of that. A waveform on an oscilloscope is a cross section of a spiral, right? So three-dimensionalize in your head a waveform, and you will see it's a spiral. And so what we're talking about when we're talking about these bits of information at the Planck level that are oscillating, we're talking about spinners. We're talking about little vortices, you know, that like your earrings and like what's in
yeah,
the
it's fractal.
models in the back of on your back wall. Those, you know, this is why it's found in sacred geometry everywhere. The importance of spin has been forgotten or misunderstood in physics, meaning that it's a fundamental principle of organization. The reason the world organizes is because spin is involved. That's what creates coherency. You know, this is why the Earth spins, this is why the solar system spins, this is why galaxy spins, this is why everything spins, is because at the fundamental level, there is vortices that are forming in this field of information. And when a vortice forms, you can imagine it's like water, right? Again, it's like a fluid. So imagine the fluid in your bath, okay, before you pull the plug, is all chaotic, right? All the molecules are chaotic. There's no organization. You wouldn't have creation in a world that was all chaotic like that. But now pull the plug in your bath, and you'll see that if you have a rubber ducky in your bath, it will start orbiting around the plug, right? Why is it orbiting? Well, Einstein said it's like gravity is like the surface of the water going down the drain. You know, it's curving, the curvature of space-time. But what I found is that that's a secondary effect. The primary effect is that all the molecules near the drain are spinning together. They're co-moving. So imagine the field of information at the quantum level is chaotic in most regions, except where there's matter. Where there's matter is because there's a little vortex there, right? And because there's a change in density in this field, at the quantum level, it's really dense. At the cosmological level, it's much less dense. Just like your plug in your bath, when you pull the plug, you're creating a gradient that makes the water spin. Well, there's a gradient in the universe, in the density of this field of information, that makes it spin from the universal size all the way down to the subatomic particle size and everything in between. So galaxy spins because of that same gradient. That's why they look like hurricanes, which spin because of a gradient in the air flow. You know, star spins, planet spins, everything spins because of this gradient in this fundamental field. This is what I discovered. Now, like I said, if it's not just philosophy, the math add up and they produce very important predictions that are confirmed in laboratory.
Yeah, and also the oscillation process has within it a dynamic of expansion and collapse. And
Correct.
in this paper, The Origin of Spin, you talk about torque and how it collapses and expands the energy. And then you can it really helped me to understand how this is a kind of an egg and a chicken all together, kind of a dynamo that makes everything work without the linear, what brought about what, but just as a kind of an endless rotation,
Right.
in a fractal field.
In a fractal field, exactly, that you know, that has infinite amount of dimensions, meaning and when I mean dimensions, I don't mean like parallel universe, I just mean different scales, right? Different density. So it has infinite density towards the middle, towards the small, and then you know, infinite expansion towards the large. And like you said, there's a dynamic between the expansion and the contraction, which we call the electromagnetic field and the gravitational field, right? And this dynamic is present, this gradient is present at all scales, so it makes everything spin into existence. So when we look at matter, we're actually looking at the Planck field, or this quantum field, this vacuum structure oscillator. Like each oscillator is like a little Planck oscillator. It's of the Planck length, right? So it's oscillating at a very high frequency. But people have to visualize this. Because you know, people would say, well, why can't I see this field? Why can't I feel this field? Well, people are gotta realize that it's happening at billions of times smaller than subatomic particles. So of course, it's extremely hard for even our devices to measure it. We are able to now, but you know, it took a very long time. Not until the 90s could we start to measure it. But it actually is nothing that you have a direct experience of, except that your consciousness might be made of it and all the matter around you. But if I grew one of the little Planck oscillator, like one of those little vortex, so it was the size of a grain of sand, then the proton, which is already very minuscule, would have the diameter of the distance between our sun and Alpha Centauri, which is 40 trillion kilometers. So you can imagine it's so tiny, it's so small that like it's hidden from us. We don't know it's there. It's like we're fish in the water, but we don't know that there's water. So we think there's only fish. And so it's very, very recent that we can measure it. And it's very recent that we're starting to think that we can actually engineer devices to tap into it, which is even, but imagine if we make a device, so let's say we make a gravitational device that's able to tap into it. Well, when we tap into it, if it's the source of consciousness as well, that means we're tapping into the universal consciousness. So yeah, it's profound. And if the Ark of the Covenant, if not the box, but the power source, if the power source was one of those devices that taps into this, it was accurate to call it the seat of God. It was accurate to call it, you know, the universal consciousness. You know, it was accurate to think that this thing was not just like an object, but something that was tapped into the universal consciousness or God or whatever you want to call it. Imagine where that leads. All of a sudden, you know, you have the universe as a hard drive. You have infinite active memory. You're tapping into the source of creation. And so you can imagine you can probably produce matter out of it. All the things you see on Star Trek become possible, like the replicator, traversing wormholes, all this stuff. And you would expect that. You know why? Because technology always follows science fiction. If we can think about it, if we can visualize it, then most likely it's because it can be done.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was just reciting this sentence yesterday.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I've been curating an art exhibition for a good friend, which she's very unique, and she deals with the evolution. And so it was very interesting to incorporate into the text about the exhibition actually the material that you talk about, that if we can envision it, we can become it, and that all the science fiction is actually real science all around us.
Right.
That's what we realize more and more. And yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah. All of the things we have in modern history, all of our technology was visualized and thought of before it was made, right? And somebody had to think about it. And most of it was in science fiction before it was discovered, meaning like the rockets, the refrigerator, the cell phones, the everything. I mean, the submarines, they were all in science fiction before they were in science fact. So, you know, if you want to know what the future technology is going to look like, you look at science fiction and you'll get it. You get a sense of where it's going to go, and it's going that way. I mean, like, and we're really close now. We're really close to very advanced technological developments that have a chance to save our world from the terrible position it's in right now, from the ecological disaster we've made so far with our technology. So it's a new level of technology that harmonizes with nature instead of destroying nature, and because it's just that much more advanced.
Yeah, I completely resonate with that, and I know it in my heart to be true. And I also know that that understanding these concepts, these scientific technologies that are in our potential, is also to harness the law of attraction, which is the intuitive, maybe more visionary side of it, that can, you know, just harness the laws of the universe, both in the psychological arena, you know, relationship between people, between countries, as
Yeah,
well as in
yeah,
the
yeah,
technology.
right. I call it vacuum engineering. You know, like when you realize that you're baiting in a field that's interacting with you and it's producing your reality, then you start to realize, well, what I feed into that into that field, you know, like what I feed forward will come back, right? So then you start to feed forward what you want, not what you don't want, right? And then you start to get a feedback that's more of what you want and less what you don't want. So it's very powerful. It really makes a big impact on your life, but on society as well as a whole, because every person that realizes this, you know, all of a sudden can have a much larger impact on the morphogenetic field, which is this field of information, than everybody else in the world. So they can start to become leaders in helping people learn to engineer their own field, you know?
Yeah, that's amazing. As a person who's really into education, such as yourself, I was meaning to ask you if you ever had any ideas how this idea of harnessing free energy and the oscillation dynamic and torque dynamic and a torus dynamic, how can they be applied to basic educational devices for children and adolescents, so that, you know, the young generation, when they grow up, it's already resonated within their consciousness, and they'll have the solutions that just like that, and nothing, it could be, unstoppable.
Right. Well, because, everybody out there can be an Einstein. And it's just that we've kind of killed the creative power of children very early with our current educational system, where we assume that they don't know anything, and we assume that we have to like teach them all these things that are not necessarily useful to them, instead of allowing them to learn what they're excited about. So hopefully we can change that. I mean, this is why I started the Resonance Academy out of the Resonance Science Foundation, was to provide an alternative to the current educational system, and give a different narrative, and that there's another story going on, both on the history of science, but as well on the history of humanity as a whole, and the new science that are being developed. So I'm really excited about making more courses, some that are easier for younger people and so on. I mean, the course that's out there currently, the delegate program, is college level course. But my kids did it, and some of the staff here, their kids did it too, and they did just fine. But if you, hopefully we're looking at getting accredited and so on, and getting all, this stuff out, and collaborating with other educational foundations to like bring the different levels of the course out, so that people can learn what is actually the transformation that's occurring, and then they can contribute to this transformation, instead of learning things that are actually at this point almost obsolete. It's important to understand the history of science and to understand how we got here, but it's so much more important to actually understand where we need to go and how we're going to get there, and what is being developed in the current physics, in the current scientific paradigm, and with an optic for the transformation of humanity. That is critical. So we have to transform our educational system. It's not serving us. It's not serving the children. When you look at the amount of difficulties children have, the amount of prescription drugs that they feed the children in the Western world to like get them to sit quietly for 8 hours a day in front of a desk listening to stuff that they're not necessarily interested in. There's something wrong there. What's wrong is not the children. It's not the chemicals in their brain. What's wrong is the way we assume that education should occur.
Of course. When my child was supposed to go to school, for me, the only option was democratic system. I don't know if you have those in the States. Democratic schools where, the child decides what he's going to learn today, how many hours he's going to learn, and he chooses his curriculum.
Oh, nice.
And that's the only way.
We call them project schools here, but they're not very common. They're hard to find.
Yeah, also in Israel, they're not so common, but there are quite a few.
Oh, good. Yeah. Good. I've always said that the kids should learn what they want to learn. For instance, a kid makes a project. It says, okay, my project is to open a fishing business, right? And so now he has to figure out budgets. He has to figure out, he's got to write a bunch of stuff. He's got to do all this stuff. So he learns to write. He learns to calculate, but he learned useful skills that are going to be useful to that person when they grow, currently kids graduate from college, they don't know how to balance a checkbook. They don't know how to cook. They don't know they barely know how to take care of themselves, right? They've studied differential equations that if they're not in the scientific field, they probably will never use, right? So how many hours of their life they actually learn something that's completely useless to them, right? Um, yeah. So life is precious. Every minute is precious. You have to capitalize on every second of the day, every second of your life. And I just find it horrifying what we put children through.
When about 2 years ago, I was volunteering in my daughter's school. I started a sacred geometry class.
Yeah.
For children between the 4th and the 6th grade. And in the first year, I had 6 children. In the second year, I had 14 children. And I taught them about you and about all sorts of things about sacred geometry and about the Fibonacci sequence and the Merkaba and the flower of life. And they were like blown away. I was showing them presentations and they were like, their jaws were hanging. And it was, you can really feel that they resonated when I was talking to them about the connected worldview versus the disconnected worldview.
Yeah.
And asking them, what do you think, is more likely? And they said, of course, the connected worldview. Of course, everything is alive. Of course, everything is interconnected.
Right. The children know. Yeah, the children know. They instinctively know, but that's the thing. We breed it out of them with the standard educational system. We tell them that not to have creative thoughts. We teach them to just stick to the convention. Please don't come up with anything too crazy. Don't ruffle feathers. Just do your thing. And if you eventually get to a PhD, now that's the place where you all of a sudden have to be creative, because now you got to come up with something new that's unknown, right? And so all of a sudden you got to come up with something new. But even in that case, and especially in physics, they discourage you from coming up with something completely outside the current status quo. They want you to just do a small improvement on what's already there. And so that means that it can never actually quantum jump to something completely different, right? So for instance, in archeology is a good example. If you're studying ancient monuments that have megalithic stones in it, you cannot say that there's some kind of technology must have been used, right? You have to go with the status quo that like slaves with vine ropes were pulling on these rocks, somehow magically made them go hundreds of miles across riverbeds and mountain ranges, which is not even doable with standard, like very advanced lifting capacities that we have today. So, but if you say anything different, you will not get your PhD. In fact, you'll be laughed out of the class. You'll be, in trouble. You'll probably get kicked out. So this is the problem. This is a very fundamental problem in our civilization. It has to change.
Yeah.
Einstein was lucky in some ways that he had the support of Planck, Max Planck, and others that made it possible at the time in the physics community to like get heard. Without that support, and I assure you that if Einstein was trying to publish relativity today, he would have a hell of a time if we hadn't discovered it, because it's not such a small community anymore, and so on. And so it really takes a lot to break through the status quo, and that's wrong. Any system that doesn't actually encourage radical new ideas is not a system that is bounded towards creativity and transformation. It's a system that will become stagnant and eventually that will disappear, meaning it will, if it can't move forward anymore, it will just self-destruct, right?
Yeah, it seems like we're the opposite of a civilization today, because to be a civilization is to be civil and not to kill and not to control other people and to consume and not give anything in return. So we've become the opposite of a civilization. But at the same time, with all the negativity going on, there is a lot of positive movement, a lot of virtual and spiritual and ecological movements on the beneficial direction, you know, trying to make good changes, trying to create communities and awareness. And it's also amazing. And also you came along and tied the threads that Russell and Tesla and Einstein left behind, and you know, tied it all together so elegantly.
Thank
And
you.
thank you. And you received the Albert Einstein Award just recently, right?
Yeah, I did. Uh,
So, so congratulations.
Thank you. I think it's on its way. I feel enthusiastic and positive that humanity is on its way. You can see that status quo breaking up everywhere in all the districts, in all the different arena of humanity, from finances to military structures to political structures. You know, society is changing very fundamentally. The way we do business. I mean, cryptocurrency, all this stuff. It's all like emerging right now. I just hope it emerges fast enough that we can make this big change in our society fast enough that we can survive the environmental issues that we're facing today.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I hope so too.
Every person makes a difference. Every person that, you know, opens up, that lighten up, that, you know, that evolves, that, you know, that transform. Every single being that does that makes a huge difference for the whole.
Yeah, exactly. Do you want to talk a little bit about the Egypt convention, about the gathering? How was it? Why did you choose Egypt, and what new insights did you get from this gathering? How was it?
Well, the Egyptian, you know, delegate gathering was just remarkable. It was the most amazing time. It was almost 3 weeks. You know, I've studied the Egyptian ancient traditions and, you know, monuments for almost 25 years, and I knew a lot of details about all these things, but it's a whole other thing to actually be out there and experiencing it directly. We had such an amazing group. The people taking the delegate program is such a high quality student body. It's so awesome. And so we had so much expertise there already. Like we had people that are miners or that are foremen for mining companies and so on. So they know what it takes to move big rocks. They know what it takes to extract rocks from a quarry. They, you know, all this stuff. And we had the most amazing guides. The guides we had were very well trained in the conventional story, and they were chematologists as well. They knew, you know, that most of what's being taught about the conventional story, well, at least a good portion what's being taught about the conventional story and dynastic Egypt is not quite correct. And
I'm, I'm going to meet them in May. I'm going to meet Patricia.
oh, wonderful.
Yeah, I'm going.
And Wonderful. Yeah. And so we were able to like really kind of dig in and see the evidence with your own eyes, because it's one thing to see an obelisk that weighs, 550 tons, but it's a whole on a picture, but it's a whole other thing to stand underneath it and look up and look at the perfection of the cut of the object and perfection of the placement. Like, and then you go, okay, this is not people with like copper chisel going at like, Aswan granite, which is super hard, or other stones that were even harder. It kind of hits you hard when you're there. Okay, this has got to come from something completely different, much more advanced. And then the energy of these building, we were so fortunate to be able to obtain permits to have the 3 pyramids at Giza overnight during the full moon, and that was just the most powerful, incredible nights with many stories from all the 200 participants, amazing experiences. So it's hard to describe. People ask me all the time, how was the Egypt tour? And it's like there's not really any words to describe how transformative it was. I think for everybody, everybody I've talked to that was there on our trip came back home and transformed, and they've been transformed since then. It's just not quite the same. And so I'm really excited for the next one that's going to be in Peru in November, and to tap into those vortices and open some of these portals in Peru.
Amazing. What would you say to people in Israel that are maybe debating whether to visit Egypt due to the political situation? What would you say to them?
So many things I would love to say, that's why I have to think about, because there's so many different levels, of the conflict.
Yeah.
And the conflict is really not just on the physical level. Conflict is really an energetic conflict, and really like an example of humanity and the structure of humanity. The other thing I'd like to say is that the conflict is not necessarily amongst the people, right? The conflict is an industrial military conflict. It's being driven by a financial and industrial gain reasons, right? So it's not, it's not even just political, right? It's not religious. It's driven by a very specific monetary agenda. The people of Islam and the people of Israel, they could get along if that agenda wasn't pushing. They have similar roots. They are brothers and sisters. They are not opposed to each other in the sense that, like, the Quran, has Moses in it, and has it has all of the brag tradition, or are put forward and understood and accepted. And the instability comes from very important efforts that were made to destabilize those regions for military industrial complex gains and financial reasons.
How long do you think this is going on? I mean,
well, I think that you could go all the way back to the Roman era, right? And see this intense, conflict structure building from those early times because of, again, military and industrial reasons. At the time, being the Roman Empire, but which eventually came to like be the Vatican and all the, you know, the other reasons. So, and this is where my work can help maybe. They all relate to the same event, meaning they all relate to this technology being present in that region that was called the Ark of the Covenant. It all relates back to that. It all relates back to even the Christians. You see, it's not well understood. The New Testament, right, that talks about Joshua, or Emmanuel, as he's called in the Bible, his relationship to the Temple of Solomon and the Ark of the Covenant is not well understood. That is, the Old Testament talks about the Ark all the way through. It's the central point of the whole thing. And then all of a sudden, Emmanuel is called the living Ark, but when you look at his journey, he goes to the Temple of Solomon to try to reestablish the Ark in the temple. And so what I believe happened is that the Ark was removed out of the Temple of Solomon long before Emmanuel, long before Joshua was born, and brought to the Essene community. The Essene community was the B plan if the Temple of Solomon was to be attacked. Of course, the high priest had the B plan to get the Ark out of there so that, you know, the enemy wouldn't get a hold of it. And they found the tunnels from the Temple Mount that led out of the city, right? And the Essene community was not known by the scholars. There was no writing about that specific Essene community on the Dead Sea, on the Dead Sea, because they weren't gonna publicize their B plan, right? They weren't gonna publicize their secret location where they're gonna bring the Ark if there was a problem. So of course the Essene community received the Ark when the Temple of Solomon was attacked by the Philistines. And I believe that the Dead Sea Scrolls, and certainly the Copper Scroll from the Essene community, describes the Ark arriving at the Essene community. And there's only one Copper Scroll out of the 900 Dead Sea Scrolls that were found or so. And the copper that it's written on is extremely pure. It's the purest copper found on Earth. So it's remarkable. And Vandal Jones has found some of the items that the Copper Scrolls described came with the Ark to the Essene community. So he found in the caves near the Dead Sea, near Qumran, near where the Essene community was, he found these items. So we know it's real. The Ark did go to the Essene. So I believe Emmanuel was born there. Joshua was born there. Mm. And I believe, and this might be shocking to people there, but I believe that actually Emmanuel was had the power he had because he learned to use the Ark of the Covenant. He learned to use its power. Like the capacity to walk on water would be a gravitational effect, right? The capacity to heal people might be from the capacity to really transform the water molecules, and many, many things, right, that he did may have been the result of him being able to use this power, right? And when he went to the Temple of Solomon, so that's the journey that the New Testament takes us on, right? When he turns 32 and then he wants to go to the Temple of Solomon. Well, he's going there to tell the high priest that he's going to bring the Ark back into the temple. This is why when he arrives there and he sees that they're selling money and that they put pagan idols in the Holy of Holy, and they, basically desecrated the Temple of Solomon, he gets really upset and kicks everybody out. But of course, the high priests don't want the Ark to come back, because they're not going to have the control they have. So they convince the Romans to take him out. But that's why the whole thing with the Romans torturing him and saying, I wash my hands from this, you know, why are the high priests trying to kill you? You know, why do they want to kill you? Well, of course, Emmanuel, Joshua is not going to tell the Romans, oh, but, well, because the Essenes have the ark, right? Because he doesn't want to give the ark to the Romans. He doesn't want to tell them that he told the high priest he's going to bring the ark back.
Yeah.
So I know this is a long story, but anyway, so you see, even the New Testament and the Christian story is connected to the ark. And I really believe that he was brought back to life, or at least healed. I don't think he actually died on the cross. I think he was healed from the wounds that he received on the cross using the ark, because the Essene had it, and he was, you know, he was revived that way. This might sound really extraordinary, and you might want to include it or not in your article. But so this is what I have to say to all the people of Israel and the Islamic people, is that it's all connected. The Quran, what the Quran says, what the Bible says, what the ancient manuscript says, they all connect to this very important thing, that this very important technology and this important knowledge about the structure of the universe, which eventually Hitler came across. And this is why he was so intensely wanting to get all the manuscripts from the Jewish community and try to find clues to where the ark was. And he sent people in archaeological finds all around the world. You know, he bullied all the other teams from other countries. He was trying to find one of these power sources.
Yeah. In relation to what you said about Jesus and the Essenes, I mean, maybe he was himself one of them, an Essene.
Yeah.
And actually, they say from things that I have read that the Qumran cult, that was called the Yachad, or the Yachad means together. They were very secluded, and they fled to Qumran area because the government, the people in control, Hashmonai house, were already pretty much very corrupt, and they hid all of their literature in Qumran. And actually, a lot of people say that all this big library is actually the whole of the Israelite text before the canonization of the text.
It's very strange that many of the Dead Sea Scrolls have been censored.
Yeah.
We only have access to, I think, 100 or a little more, but most of the Dead Sea Scrolls have been censored.
Yes, because they were probably, some of them, there were texts in Greek, in Aramaic, and in Hebrew, and they probably were conducting translation and writing their own text, and also the way they conducted their religious rituals and holidays. Some of them were related to the lunar cycle, and some of them to the sun cycle. So, as I guess, as the government, the progress came on, so some of the old traditions were rejected and some were accepted. So that's why, through the canonization process, some things are rejected, some things are like, okay, that's okay, we can live with that. And I think to this day there's a lot of a dispute to their identity of the Essenes, who they were.
There's no doubt, though, that the ark went to the Essene.
Okay.
Because the Dead Sea Scroll clearly The copper scroll, I mean, there's a reason why the copper scroll was written on copper. They were trying to make sure that one would survive for sure. And, you know, it doesn't talk about anything else than all the ingredients that came with the ark and where they hid them in the cliffs of Qumran. And so, and Wendell Jones found the, you know, the placement of, like, for instance, the oils and the incense and all the stuff that was used in the Holy of Holy to tend to the Ark of the Covenant. So, and then he found the chamber where they kept the Ark, you know, in the cliffs there. And that chamber was open. And, you know, I mean, if you look up Wendell Jones and you study what he did, it's very, very clear that, you know, the Essene did have possession of the ark for an extended period of time, you know, at least, I believe, during the first century, until the first century, and the events that happened with Christ, or with who I like to call Emmanuel.
Emmanuel is Christ?
Yeah, Emmanuel is his original name. It's in the Bible. It's mentioned 2 times in the Bible, but it's generally ignored. I rather call him with that name because I think it's more of his original name. It might be even his Essene name, you know, and then his name was modified later on.
And also in the Masada site, ancient site of Masada,
Yeah.
Metzada in Hebrew, which is also in close proximity to where they were. And in this site, there is the remains of a very beautiful floor mosaic in kind of a Roman Greek style. But in the middle, you can see like the edge of it's almost completely ruined, but you can see a seed of life used to be there in the middle.
Oh, wow.
I can send you an image of it.
Oh, I would like that.
It's so rare to find something like that in Israel. And as a sacred geometry researcher, I'm always on the lookout for, you know, archaeological remains of sacred geometry, and especially the flower of life. And it's very rare to find, and it's never explained.
As well, that pattern is on the ossuaries. If you look in my 4 DVD sets, on the 4th DVD, I talk about it and I show pictures of it, animations of it. It was a movie that was done, a documentary that was done about these ossuaries that were found that they believe might have been the family of Emmanuel, the family of Jesus. And they have the flower of life right on them. It's remarkable. Really? Yeah, you gotta check it out.
It's very fascinating to me to try to connect Judaism, even though I'm not religious, but I'm a part of this tradition, and to see how Judaism has incorporated sacred geometry into its belief system. Today it's so fragmented. You know, the only thing that we think about is the Star of David, but nobody really understands its meaning and significance. And also in the Kabbalah, which is the most esoteric part of Judaism, they talk about sacred geometry in a way.
Yeah, it's on these ossuaries. These ossuaries are from 1st century, prior to Christianity.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah. That's why they think it's the family of Jesus. You know, like it might have been the first Christians, but it really wasn't a religion at the time. It was, you know, it was just apostles and the family of Jesus. I decoded the Kabbalistic tree to show that it's a tetrahedral structure. Of course, the Star of David is a tetrahedron structure. I think it represented the power of the ark. That's why it's the flag of Israel. I solved these equations in advanced physics using tetrahedral structures. They give the right answer, and very, very precisely the right answer. So the Star of David is literally the structure of this fundamental field. And so I think that that symbol is actually a representation of the power of the ark. It's in the tree of life. You know, the Sephiroth are spherical, like they're spheres. They're described as spheres in the Kabbalistic text. And when you decode that whole thing, you do end up with the flower of life. You know, but in the tetrahedral function.
Yeah, yeah.
And it appears in various places. Like, you know, it's interesting that these ossuaries were thought to be the one that Cameron identified as being the ossuary of Mary Magdalene has the best example of the, at least the seed of life being on there. It says Mary Omne on it, which might have been her original name. And you can watch that movie. It's an interesting movie. I can't remember the exact name of it. The Tomb of Jesus, I think it was called, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
By what's the name of Cameron? His first name is
James Cameron?
James Cameron, yeah.
I'll look it up. Also, in the biblical connotation, it's very interesting how those really ancient myths still affect us today, you know, in our modern day politics and in the whole of the situation in the Middle East. It's just so profound to think about it, how deeply the myth of the Israelite slavery, of, you know, the Exodus, what is the reason, these are things that always interest me to understand things in the archetypal sense, in the transpersonal sense of reality.
Yeah.
What is the meaning of, why did this myth came about? Why is it so rooted? And what can be done maybe today to uproot this distortion?
Yeah, well, you know, I think the true story has to emerge. The true story of what happened really at that time. What was the impetus of the whole Israeli tribe and the connection between the Israeli tribe, Islam, and Christianity, which all meet at the Ark of the Covenant. Like if that was actually understood, I think then there could be a really deep reconciliation, at least at the religious level. As we evolve, people can get more and more compassion for each other. And that allows for more empathy for each other, you know, because all people want in the world is to raise their children, have what they need, you know, to eat and have and love each other. I mean, people are not born to kill each other. They're put in that position when they feel they have no other options. If they feel like they have no other options, then they will do crazy things like that. But naturally, people are not born killers. You know, they're born, you know, wonderful, angelic, loving beings. I think as people grow in their consciousness and their awareness, realize that everything is connected, that we're all connected, you know, and that the survival of any of us is reliant on the survival of all, then I think this is changing. This is changing. And hopefully the power structures, the financial and the military power structure is changing as well. And with these new technologies emerging, allowing, you know, because if we are extracting almost an infinite amount of energy from the structure of space-time, then we don't have to fight for oil anymore. We don't, you know, and many territory dispute can go away, you know. So, you know, there's really a lot of hope that this is all gonna resolve. Hopefully it can resolve before it explodes.
So thank you so much for this interview. And it's such a great honor to talk to you in person. Great.
Okay.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much. You take
Bye.
care.
This was the interview with Nassim Haramein, an interview that I have made with him 4 or 5 years ago, and so much has happened since then. And it took me a long time to edit it and upload it to make a little piece of art, like I like to do with everything that I do. But I think it's significant how everything we're talking about is still so relevant, sadly and amazingly. One of the topics that arise through the conversation is the process of the dying of the old paradigm and the ushering of a new paradigm, a new world, a new society. And this is not something that can happen in one day, of course, maybe not even in a few decades. Now more than ever, in the age of information and soon to be the space age as well, as I believe, we have the most integrated vision and knowledge of history and human psychology and human culture that we ever had from our predecessors, from our ancestors. And maybe it is not by chance that all that is taking place on our planet, that from the one hand we can see all this amazing advancements in so many fields, and on the other hand, we can see that we still have such very large and prevalent toxic environments that we need to clean from our society before we can create a new one. And this is like a simultaneous evolution, a simultaneous process of things dying and things being birthed. And the new is not totally in place. And there is still so much devastation and grief. I feel, as someone that is living in the Middle East, I feel that grief has become a very large part of my life, both in the personal and in the collective sense. It can be very frustrating to be an explorer of consciousness, mindfulness, sacred geometry, the hero's journey as someone living in the Middle East. The things that we need to deal with every day, it doesn't matter if you're a Jew, Christian, a Muslim, Druze, Cherkessi, a Bedouin, it doesn't matter. We are all now in the midst of a very, very painful lesson. I think it has to do, in a sense, to the narcissistic wound of the world, the absence of the sacred feminine, the absence of the sacred masculine, toxic femininity, toxic masculinity, all the paradigms of dominance and control of myself and other people. And I can feel this process, this wound, this ancestral wound going through my veins, my family veins, my friends' families' veins, and all around in the Middle East. As a consciousness explorer, as a teacher of sacred geometry, and as a spiritual guide through the art of tattooing, I struggle with finding hope and faith and inner knowing, because I know the only thing we don't have the privilege to let go of is faith and optimism as a moral choice. Optimism as a moral choice. This is the stream of consciousness that prevails no matter what. It doesn't matter if we are feeling well or under the weather, connected to ourselves or in a big crisis. In the end of the day, ultimately, moment by moment, we need to make a choice. So many good people make efforts from either nationality, from every religion. There are large efforts, material and spiritual efforts, to make the Middle East a better place, an inclusive place for all of its inhabitants. I many times wonder why this is the situation, that despite all the good people and despite all the efforts, we are still being under the reign of dominancy and control and warmongering. living under the sword, having enemies and nemesises and whatever. And I think at the end of the day, being almost 52 and being, a child of the 70s and 80s, I wish so much for peace in the Middle East and all over the world, wherever people are suffering from war and under dangerous situations and circumstances, under dictatorships and under totalitarian regimes. I really, really wish for our world to grow up and just listen, to look through our inner eyes, under our ancient eyes, in the words of Barbara Marciniak, to look through our ancient eyes and just try to feel who we are. Who am I? What am I? What do I want to be? Am I able to stop the war that is taking place inside of me? Can I truly be my own friend? Can I be so attentive as to banish every negative thought, every thought and emotion pattern that doesn't serve me? Can I be really my best friend like I used to be as a child before the world ran over me? I'm sure we all want to reconnect to our inner child, and this is the true liberation. And maybe this is right now the true timing. I really love the thought that this is the true timing for the emergence of this new society, the emergence of my new future, to become the sacred geometry teacher I want to be, to travel the world and explore mysteries, to find out about our past, about our history and prehistory, and to understand all our mythologies and how they all connect at the base, at the root, to understand how every religion and every spiritual system comes from the same source and really ultimately helps us to understand what are the basic needs of the human being? What are the human most basic needs that everybody needs, that everybody deserves to have, so we can live in peace, in prosperity, and really have our most inner needs being met? This is our birthright. And understanding sacred geometry and the hero's journey and all the archetypes of the mind, of the consciousness that can lead us through our path, through our journey. When we learn that, we learn the inner map to our journey in this life, on this earth, and beyond the human experience, because we are so much more than just human experience in this time space. We are multidimensional beings having a human experience, but we also have other experiences in multiple dimensions and frequencies. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. Talking to Nassim was, of course, such a big honor for me after so many years that I follow him and follow his work and being so inspired to my own work and research. And for me, what Nassim brings to the world is so profound and so significant and so important that every man and woman on this earth learn these things that the Resonance Science Foundation teaches us are the basic outlines to understand the world from a more holistic way and to usher us into a new world, of a new humanity, of a new technology that can combine human aspiration with integrity and dignity. It is so important in this day and age, with all the dangers of big data and AI and all the rest of it, to really develop your own sovereignty, Because if we don't look out for our boundaries and our red flags and guidelines and value systems, it will be taken from us. It will be infringed on. If we don't demand our sovereignty, our dignity, our integrity, our individuality, then we have nothing. Then we are giving our power to other people, to other forces. The world, such a profound part of being a cooperative component in the world, in the words of Esther Hicks. Engaging and participating in reality demands that we really know ourselves, that we develop a bullshit detector, boundaries, a true value system. A value system that is based on core values, humanistic core values. We are living in such weird times, I'm feeling. This is, I think, very related to and all this subject of being in the Middle East, in a war zone for so many years, and being also a very spiritual person who really believes in the beyond, and that everything happens for a reason, and that believes in a divine plan that we're all part of. I strongly believe, of course, that we are all part of a grand divine plan, and we are all taking part in this reality like a Shakespearean play. Each one of us is a character, is a player, is an actor. And my wish is to act my part to the best of my ability from the bottom of my heart, and for the betterment of mankind and the planet, and for reclaiming my galactic identity that I crave and miss it so much, and can't wait for space age to really begin and affect lay people like me, not just governments and secret operations, but to really usher open communication. And this whole Israeli-Palestinian dispute that is going on for so many decades, I think it's such bullshit. I think it's all about political agenda. I think it's just throwing sand in our eyes. Because I live here, I live in Haifa, I live in a very integrated neighborhood, and I know that most of the people in the Middle East just want to live their lives peacefully. I have neighbors which are Arabs, which are Muslims and Christians, and I am friends with them, and we like each other. And it's just the warmongerings of politicians and political and economical agendas. And we all know that. Of course, it goes without saying, but there are still many big forces that still have the power to do all this damage, all this unspeakable, brutal, so unnecessary deaths from every side, from all sides. We are all victims of this situation to the same degree. We are all being played. We are all being controlled. And I hope for us, for each one of us, to find sovereignty at every moment to the best of my ability, to the best of our ability, and to start finding solutions to change the station, like to make this place a prosperous place for everyone. And maybe it will take years, maybe decades, maybe hundreds of years. I don't know. I don't know if I will stay here for many years. There's a huge world and I want to travel. So my goal is to bring inspiration and to be an advocate for a life of passion, of love action, of going with your highest excitement, and listen to your heart and following your dreams. So until next time, be safe on your journey. Much love, and see you soon.